If you heard a dog barking in a quiet temple, would you think it was an omen? The story begins with a police dog, but ends with opening the door to something that has been sleeping for thousands of years. Why is it barking at the nun's belly? What is hidden inside? And who is behind it? This is not just a secret in the temple, but a mystery of the dark power that is about to awaken. Don't blink, because the ending will change everything you believe in your whole life. Police dog invades temple, barks at nun's belly, discovers shocking truths you wouldn't expect. Morning sunlight shines through the tops of large trees. Leaves gently sway in the wind. The temple bell rings rhythmically. The temple is quiet, only the birds chirping. A group of nuns are walking meditation by the chapel. Suddenly, a loud bark is heard from the temple gate. A black police dog rushes in at high speed. 2 officers follow behind, their faces terrified. The dog barks nonstop. It runs straight toward the group of nuns. Many nuns are shocked, exclaiming in fear. But the dog stops in front of one nun. She is carrying a large belly. Her face is pale. The dog lifts its nose to sniff her belly and barks madly. The officers rush in to block the crowd. A monk walks out of the hut in a hurry. He asks what happened. The officer softly says, "We are looking for something hidden in this temple." The nun who was barked at starts to tremble. Her eyes widened. Sweat poured down her forehead. The officer asked for permission to examine. The senior monk nodded hesitantly. The female doctor who followed her picked up the special examination machine. The nun started to cry, her voice trembling. "I did nothing wrong." The examination machine started to beep. The nun's abdomen moved slightly. The female doctor looked at the officer in shock. "There's a foreign object in the abdomen. It is not a baby." The nun immediately collapsed to the ground. The officer rushed to support her. "Open the infirmary. Examine her now." The nun tried to resist, shouting loudly, "No, don't do anything to me." The other monks and nuns were shocked. The officer discovered that there was something embedded in the nun's abdomen. It was a small cloth bundle that was neatly hidden. When it was opened, there was a prohibited object inside. It was stolen from an old case 6 months ago. The entire temple fell silent immediately. The sound of birds chirping disappeared. The police dog sat down, looking at the nun silently. His eyes seemed to know everything. The nun looked back, crying in despair. "He forced me. I was forced." The officers looked at each other before deciding to investigate urgently. In the temple that was once quiet, now it was filled with confusion and questions. Who exactly was behind all this? The senior monk slowly walked in. His face was serious. His lips pursed. "This nun was ordained 3 months ago," he said softly but firmly. "No one knows her true history." The officer began to question the nun carefully. The nun averted her gaze, her hands shaking. He threatened to harm my family." Her voice was soft. "I had no choice. He hid something from me and set me here." The officer asked the person's name. She shook her head, crying harder. "He wore a mask. He never told me his real name." Everyone's breathing was heavy. A monk muttered, "Does that mean someone in the temple is involved?" Everyone's eyes turned to look at each other. The silence spread like a cold air. The officer immediately started to inspect the temple. The police dog started to lead the way to the back of the church. It stopped at a pile of dry leaves under a Bodhi tree. It barked again. The officer used his hands to part the pile of leaves, revealing an old manhole cover covered with wooden planks. When it was opened, a musty smell rose up. Inside was a small secret tunnel. The corridor led deep into the darkness. The officer turned on the flashlight. The sound of footsteps hitting the stone floor was loud. The walls were damp and cold, making your hair stand on end. The dog led the way. At the end was an old wooden door. On the door were strange characters carved. The door slowly opened. Inside was only an empty room, and an altar with forbidden items placed. The officer was stunned. These items were stolen from many cases, but they were all gathered here. The sound of footsteps came from the tunnel entrance. Someone was following quietly. The officer turned back. A man in a black cloak appeared quietly. His face was hidden behind a white mask. "Finally, you are here." His voice was cold. "I have something I want you to know before it is too late." The light in the tunnel started flickering. The air became unusually cold. Everyone paused for a moment. What he was going to say next. It might change everything they had believed in their whole lives. The masked man slowly raised his hand. The bright light made everyone squint their eyes. "This is not just an ordinary temple," he said in a low voice. "It is a center for the exchange of forbidden items by the powerful." The officer's eyes widened. Who was behind this? The man chuckled softly. "Do you really think that ordinary people can steal those things?" He slowly removed his mask. The face he revealed shocked everyone. He was a former high-ranking police officer, the one who disappeared in a mysterious case 2 years ago. "No one has looked for me because they know that I have not disappeared." He took out an object from the altar. It was a gold plate engraved with ancient characters. "This is the key that will open the door to supernatural power." The nuns who followed him down the tunnel began to tremble in fear. "I don't know what this is about." The man turned to look at her. "All you know is that I paid enough for you to shut up." The officer immediately drew his weapon. "You have been arrested for theft, falsification of data, and the kidnapping case." The man was unmoved. "Do you think you can get out of here?" Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet shook slightly. It sounded like something was waking up from underground. The police dog barked again, loud and shrill. The officer looked around in fear. A sound like heavy breathing came from the tunnel walls. The lights flickered again. The man began to chant ancient words. The air in the room became colder until he could see steam. The nun screamed, "Stop him! Stop him before he wakes up." The officer immediately rushed to arrest the man, but it was too late. The altar shook violently. Objects on the table flew into the air. A mysterious scream echoed from all directions. The tunnel floor began to crack. Something was rising from the darkness below, from the cracks under the floor. A dim red light surged, like lava slowly seeping out from the wounds of the earth. A low roar continued to grow. The tunnel walls shook. Soil fell to the ground. The nun cried and chanted in a trembling voice. The police dog hissed, staring at the cracks. The golden object floating in midair spun faster. The man who used to be a policeman laughed loudly. "Finally, it will wake up." The officers tried to drag him out of the room, but the force from something in the ground was pulling him harder. His body was held by a thick black shadow. "You guys don't understand. This is the soul that has been buried under the temple for over 1,000 years. It is the power that will change the beliefs of the entire country." The ground shook even harder. The crack widened. Dense black shadows flowed out like living fog. A female officer shouted, "We have to stop this ceremony." She grabbed the old monk's robe and covered the golden object. The red light began to shake. The roar stopped for a moment, but the robed man smiled. Too late. Under the ground, something began to move. A human-like shadow, several times taller than normal. It slowly appeared from the crack. Its skin was as black as ash. A pair of bright red eyes stared straight at everyone. A moment of silence felt like time had stopped. Then it let out a voice in a language no one had ever heard. The voice was bone-shaking. The nun lost consciousness immediately. All the officers collapsed to the ground. The police dog let out a long howl. The shadow stretched out its long hand. The slender fingers touched the end of the altar. All the light went out in an instant. The tunnel became pitch black. No one could move. Even breathing was swallowed up. Then a voice rang out from the darkness. It was not a human voice. It was a voice that seemed to be thousands of voices speaking at the same time. "You have woken me up. Accept the consequences." The air in the tunnel suddenly became heavier. It was as if something was pressing down on everyone's chest. The officers tried to get up, but their bodies were weak. The shadow's hand lightly touched the ground, but the ground cracked deeply into a long crack. Whispers were heard all around. It was as if there were hundreds of voices around their ears, whispering each person's name, accurately. Warapal, Anjali, Police Colonel Kriong. The shadow's eyes stared into their minds, revealing images from the past. The guilt, fear, and hidden torture. Everyone began to panic. The female officer screamed, "Stop! Get out of my head!" The shadow moved closer. The sound of shapeless footsteps echoed with every step. The cloaked man laughed again, even though he was bound by the shadow. But he seemed to have one. This is the beginning of a new era. The era where fear will rule every heart. Suddenly, a chanting sound from above broke in. A deep, resolute voice. The elder monk stood at the entrance of the tunnel. He held an ancient scripture in his hand. His face was covered in sweat, but his eyes did not waver. By the power of Dharma and faith, we ask that shadow to be still. A golden light shot down from the entrance of the tunnel. It directly hit the black shadow. It screamed in a cracking voice. Its body shook as if it was being burned from within. The golden light spread throughout the basement. The black shadow retreated slowly. Black smoke began to escape from its body. "You can't do this. You will regret resisting me." The voice changed from powerful to shaky. The cloaked man began to panic for the first time. He shouted, "No! Stop that light now." The elder monk continued to chant. His voice was resonant. It drowned out everything in the tunnel. The golden light penetrated through Black Shadow's body, revealing the human skeleton inside. The last voice everyone heard from it was, "I will return." And then it dissipated in that light, less than silence and ashes floating in the air. The ashes slowly floated in the air. A faint burning smell mixed with the smell of old incense from the basement. Everything was still. No sound, no movement. The police dog stopped howling. It turned to look at the senior monk. His eyes showed respect. The officer slowly got up from the ground, still breathing heavily in shock. The nun who caused this incident sat still, holding her hand to her stomach, tears streaming down her face. She muttered softly, "I didn't know it would be this serious." The senior monk approached, put his hand on her head kindly. Everyone has a way back, if they still have a sense of right and wrong. The robed man collapsed. His eyes were no longer arrogant. They were filled with despair. "I just want the world to see that we are not weak. But I awakened something beyond what humans should interfere with." The officer slowly handcuffed him. He didn't say anything more. He just bowed his head and accepted his fate. The elder monk looked down at the golden object that had fallen to the ground. It was broken in half, its power gone. This should be buried, where it will never be found again. Everyone nodded in agreement as they walked back to the surface. The warm sunlight welcomed them like heaven after the darkness. The sound of birds returned. The wind blew gently. The smell of damp earth and flowers floated on the wind. The female officer looked back at the tunnel. Then she turned to say, "Whether anyone believes it or not, but we saw it with our own eyes." The elder monk nodded. "And it is our duty to protect this sacred object with our lives." The temple bell rang again, ringing softly. It was like a reminder to everyone not to forget what had happened underground. Even though there was no dark shadow left, the truth still remained in the hearts of all the survivors. And under the old Bodhi tree, the earth was still warm, as if something was waiting for another time. The senior monk walked back to the church silently. His eyes looked at the ground by the old Bodhi tree. His hand slowly stroked his rosary beads. It seemed he was thinking of something he could not yet say. The entire team of officers began to collect evidence. They prepared to report everything according to procedure. But deep down, no one was sure that what they had encountered could be explained by the word case. The nun was taken to the police station to give her statement. She sat quietly, not saying a word the whole way. Her eyes looked up at the sky. It was as if she was praying that the whole story would end there. But in the secret storage room under the sala, a junior monk found an ancient wooden box. It was hidden behind the Tripitaka cabinet. The box had the same seal as a destroyed gold object. When he opened the box, there was another gold inscription inside. A red light glowed through the cracks in the wood. The junior monk stood still for a moment. Then a whisper sounded next his ear. Light deep and cold. We are still here, and you are the next chosen one. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes began to change. They became something that was no longer human. He picked up the gold plate. He held it tightly before turning around and walking out of the storage room. The red light from the wooden box went out in an instant, leaving only silence. And the question that no one knew the answer to, that thing, has it returned or has it never left? The evening sunlight shone through the old windows of the temple hall. The beam of light fell on the face of the young monk, but in his eyes there was no spark of light left. There was only a dim shadow that contained secrets. He walked silently through the temple grounds. His hand still clutched the gold leaf tightly under his robe. Every step he took was light, but steady. It was as if something inside his body was guiding him. The abbot's voice from the temple's loudspeaker called for all the monks to prepare for the evening prayers. That voice echoed throughout the temple grounds. But he did not stop. He did not turn back. He just walked straight to the old prayer room, a place that had not been used for decades. The large wooden door was tightly closed, covered in thick dust. He reached out to grab the doorknob. He tapped it lightly and pushed it in, the sound of the old hinges creaking slowly. The musty smell mixed with the smell of candles and ancient books immediately entered his nose. The room was pitch dark. Only the red light from the gold plate in his hand gradually glowed. He walked to the stone platform in the center of the room. He placed the gold plate on the ancient stone floor. Suddenly, the stone floor reflected intricate patterns, like magic circles carved for centuries. The whispers he had heard before returned, but this time louder, clearer. You have awakened. Welcome, successor of the covenant. The temple boy slowly knelt down. His eyes no longer contained fear. There was only faith, distorted, faith in something that was not the Dharma, but an ancient power buried under this earth. The sound from the floor began to shake. The red light filled the room, and in that room, a new prayer was beginning, not in Pali, not a prayer, but the call of something that had never slept even for a day. The stone platform in the center of the room shook slightly. The ancient patterns on the floor began to glow one by one. It was like blood vessels were slowly waking up from a long slumber. The whispers mixed with the monks chanting, creating a rhythm that no human could understand. The gold sheet in his hand slowly melted, not from the heat, but from a mysterious power. It turned into a deep red liquid, dropped onto the stone floor. As soon as the first drop touched the stone, the entire magic circle glowed bright red. The wind blew from all directions. Even though the doors and windows were closed, dust swirled around him. A dark shadow slowly appeared on the stone platform. It had no eyes, no mouth, but its aura was so heavy that even his breath was suppressed. The monk lowered his head. He didn't say a word. The shadow held out something. It was a small object. It looked like a drop of water, but it was pitch black. Swallow it, and you'll become one with me. The voice resounded in his heart, not through his ears. He took the object in his hand. His eyes trembled for a moment before closing them tightly. He slowly put the drop into his mouth. A chill immediately shot down his throat, so cold that his body almost stopped moving. But then it turned into a heat like fire. It circulated throughout his body. He let out a low cry. It sounded like two people speaking at the same time. The veins under his skin turned black. His eyes turned red. The shadow stood silently, looking at him. You are the first person to possess my body in 1,000 years. When the blood moon appears, you open the final door. Suddenly, the shadow disappeared, leaving only silence. The temple boy slowly stood up. His face was no longer gentle. Only his eyes were resolute. He was about to move toward something that no one in the entire temple was ready to face. The full moon came again. The blood-red sky appeared above the pagoda. The moonlight shone on the temple grounds. It was as if the whole world had stopped breathing. A cold wind blew through the temple grounds. The bell rang without a bell. The temple boy, who was no longer him, he walked out of the old prayer room. His gaze was fixed on the chapel. In his hand, he held an ancient scripture. He passed by other monks who were doing their prayers, but no one could sense his presence. It was like he was a shadow that no one could see. He stepped into the chapel. It was completely silent inside. The principal Buddha statue stood tall, casting a compassionate gaze. But his eyes at night, they seemed deeply sad and trembling. He placed the scripture on the altar. He turned to the last page. There were only a few lines of inscription. Whoever uses this power will end up being devoured. The dark shadow from within began to whisper, "You can lift this curse. Just say the last words and be one with me completely." But he was silent, still frozen, staring resolutely at the Buddha image. Then he slowly raised his hands in prayer. "I will repay by being your final cage." Suddenly, he chanted an ancient prayer upside down, a prayer that no one should ever chant again. His body trembled, and the dark shadow within struggled, but it was too late. The golden light from the Buddha image shot down, enveloping both his body and the dark shadow. The scream echoed throughout the chapel. Then everything fell silent. Suddenly, the door to the chapel opened by itself. The temple boy disappeared, leaving only a small new statue standing on the altar in front of the Buddha image. It was a statue of a monk with his hands in prayer. His eyes were closed, and his face was calm. The inscription below reads, "Those who choose to imprison darkness instead of using it." Since then, the temple returned to its original silence. No more breathing of the shadows. No more red light in the tunnel. No more whispers in the night. But every full moon night, there would be a dog sitting silently guarding the statue, its eyes still staring into the darkness, watchful, waiting, and ready to bark again if it woke up again.